You're listening to the Mike on the Right podcast.
Greetings and welcome to the Mike on the Right podcast. I am your host and favorite conservative podcaster, Mike Neal, broadcasting from the heart of the heartland, right here in central Indiana, the great Hoosier State, best in the Midwest. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. I'm just going to ask you to continue to like, share, subscribe, follow, 5-star ratings, whether you're hearing clips on Facebook or you're listening to the show on Podbean or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you are. Ratings and 5-star reviews, shares, greatly appreciate it. You're the ones that make this work. Thank you so much. Because of the amount of content on the topics I have today, we went ahead and we stripped away one of the topics. We're just going to stick to two that I announced on Thursday. But these are two very big topics. A lot of controversy, a lot of disagreement with both on the opposite sides of the political spectrum and right in the middle of each political party or ideology. But we here at Mike on the Right do not shy away from these topics because they're important to be educated upon. They're important for us to be thinking about and know about and be voting for people who espouse our positions and our values. But also just for everyday conversation, for being educated across the fruited plain, as all of us are. So we're going to talk about those real quick. But I do want to give you a preface for next week's episode. I have decided to go in depth on the relationship between Christianity and the support of Israel. What does the Bible say? What does that mean? What my position is, what the facts are. We're going to talk about that next week. So it's not going to be necessarily a news show week unless something big happens and I need to pivot. But my position on that is very clear, and we're going to talk a little bit about it today, but I want to do an entire episode based on that because it's important with what's going on right now in the geopolitical situation in the Middle East. The Middle East has been a problem for decades. There has been war, there's been terrorism, there's been stuff with oil, there's been so much there. Not just in modern history, but across the span of time. And I want to talk about that. And so that's going to be next week's episode, but we're going to get right on to our topics today, which are big and controversial. We're going to talk about the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision upholding Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. That is no small topic. And we're going to talk about the current conflict between Israel and Iran and what the involvement of the United States has been up to this point and what it should be. And we're going to talk about a brief history that leads us to today. And that'll be a preface, again, like I said, for next week's episode, which will be a 30-minute standalone episode on the relations between the U.S. and Israel and overarching Christianity. And what does the Bible say about that? We're going to go to that topic first, though, because the other one is going to be a little bit longer of a segment. Let's talk about Israel and Iran in this conflict. So why are we here? So on October 7th, 2023, as we've talked about before on this show, Hamas invaded southern Israel, killed 1,200 people, took a ton of hostages, and Iran, of course, has long been suspected and proven of financing and arming terrorists across the world. But in this situation, Hamas, they have been huge backers of Hamas. It's been a proxy war for a long time. They do the same thing with Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations. That stuff is accepted around the world, minus the axis of evil countries, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Of course, Israel responded with airstrikes in Gaza, obviously rolling through Gaza and clearing out as much as they can of the terrorist regime. But of course, as Israel learned more about the attack, started to target Iranian military infrastructure directly in Iran. And since April of 2024, up until now, there's kind of been this on-again, off-again open warfare. Israel has hit inside Iran multiple times. Iran continues to fire drones and missiles and other incursions through the air into Israeli territory. And hundreds have been killed between both sides, most of them on the Iranian side because Iran is not as technologically advanced. They don't have as good of a military as Israel has, and even their elite forces that they have were hit pretty hard. Israel knew exactly where to go and what to hit. And then, of course, there have been citizens and soldiers killed in retaliatory strikes in Israel. And so let's talk about for a moment why we are here today and what happened just essentially in like the last week or two. On June 13th, Israel launched a operation called Rising Lion. And in that, as we have learned since then, that this has been a strike that's been a long time coming, potentially even 2 decades of planning and preparing and watching and waiting and putting in infrastructure, not just in Israel, but even in Iran. Around 200 Israeli jets struck 100-plus targets in Iran, including nuclear sites, including their heavy water reactors, military bases, command centers, military aircraft facilities, deep inside Iran's territory, all the way up to the capital in Tehran and beyond. And they crippled their air support, they crippled their military support and their ability to mobilize. And of course, Mossad, which is their secret military agency, supported and played a key role. And this is where maybe that up to 20 years of planning and infiltration and setup has occurred. They were sabotaging air defenses on the ground. They had smuggled drones in and had precision munitions set and ready to go ahead of the strikes. Of course, then on June 19th was a continued attack, and through that time, looking more at, again, some of that nuclear infrastructure, as well as some of their military and nuclear workforce locations. The Israeli strikes also targeted a lot of their missile infrastructure, senior commanders, and killing hundreds of important Iranian military personnel, specifically elite leadership. This was a long time coming. Why does Israel and Iran have such a terrible relationship? Well, they didn't always. In fact, the West didn't either. And let's talk about that just for a second, just to give you context of where we are, why we're here. Pre-1979, Iran under the Shah cooperated with Israel in trade and oil and in intelligence sharing. And if you don't know who the Shah of Iran was, he was a pro-Western monarch who ruled from 1941, so, right up against the beginning of World War II until he was overthrown in 1979, who maintained strong ties with the United States and Israel. They had modernized under his leadership Iran's economy, military, but he was facing a lot of backlash for authoritarianism and corruption, which ultimately led to the Islamic Revolution that overthrew him and what essentially set in motion the Iranian government of today. After the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran became Israel's sworn enemy, calling Israel Little Satan. And then from the 1980s to 2000s, Iran has worked to fund terrorists like Hezbollah and Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other Israeli those that are coming against Israel through these proxy battles. So giving them arms, giving them money, giving them plans, giving them training, all those things. That's what Iran had done. And in 2006, the Lebanon War backed Hezbollah, Iran did, launching 4,000 plus rockets into Israel. And since then, Iran has been getting pummeled time after time after time. Israel said no more. And Israel has struck their nuclear sites. They've retaliated in many ways. And of course, Iran has worked through terror proxies and cyber attacks. It has absolutely been hell on earth in these areas. So what's been the United States' involvement? Of course, the United States has been attempted to be a partner of peace for a long time. Sometimes they've succeeded, sometimes they've failed, but obviously things have generally remained the same as far as the posture between the two and on-again, off-again attacks. But the United States supports the Israeli defense hook, line, and sinker, but of course is looking to avoid direct war with Iran. And I am 100% for that. Any opportunity we have to avoid direct war, we absolutely should do that. In 2015, President Obama signed the now failed Iran agreement to pause their uranium enrichment and to ease their sanction and all the sanctions that were against them. And President Trump comes onto the scene in 2017, and he sees and knows that Iran was still doing it in secret anyway. The United States gave money, released sanctions against a terrorist supporting state, those that hate America. President Trump found all this out and said, nope, we're done with this. Ended it. Sanctions returned, and the United States retaliated against Iran by killing one of their top generals in 2020. President Biden comes along, tries to restore the deal, and fails, of course, as war escalates. And because we know, even the United Nations knows that as worthless as the United Nations is, and that I've talked about in the past, my opposition to them, even they know that Iran has been pulling this crap. And instead, President Obama gave money to a terrorist supporting state, and who knows what that money was used for against our own people, against our allies. And again, thankfully, President Biden failed in restoring that deal. And so now, President Trump has been working to bring a deal back to the table that actually ends these enrichment sites and what's been going on there. But of course, now we're in a position where Iran was a big backer behind the 2023 attack in Israel, and that's just not something you can ignore. And something had to be done. So why must the United States block a nuclear Iran? And some of my conservative friends are like, it's not our fight, it's not our deal. We can't do anything about this. And I'm going to tell you right now, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon and fires it at our allies, or fires it at us, or attacks our bases, which are over there and close and within range, all of a sudden, these same folks are going to say, where the hell was the United States? Where the hell was our military? Why was our intelligence wrong? Why weren't we ready for this? Because we know that Iran, all the time, their political leaders, some of their hardline citizens, are always chanting and shouting, death to America, death to Israel, death to the infidel. That's us. They're not playing around. Because in their religion, we are the infidel. And in certain sects of that faith, of the Muslim faith, martyrdom and wiping out Christians and other folks that come against them gets them into their version of heaven. So yes, this matters to us all the time. In 1979, when the United States was chucked out of Iran through our embassy, one of the first things that they wrote and chiseled in on our old embassy that they took over, and now they use it as a museum to shame us? It says right on there, death to America. We can't pretend this isn't a thing. A nuclear Iran equals a regional arms race. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey, whether allies or not, or just countries in the area, they're going to start to say, hey, Iran has this. We need to protect ourselves. And it's going to move us backwards in getting rid of as many states as possible that have nuclear weapons. And of course, Iran continues, although they've been harmed, Iran continues to fund terror around the world. They are a proven funder of Hezbollah. They are a proven funder of Hamas. They are a proven funder of those who are in Yemen and Oman who have been attacking Israelis and U.S. ships and everything that's been going on out there. We have to block this. And don't take my word for it. People always, and we're going to get into a second why this isn't Iraq and what happened in Iraq in the early 2000s and 2003 after 9/11. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is UN supported, but it is completely separate. It is 100% autonomous. They have walked in the door. They have been there, and they know that Iran has enriched up to 60% on their uranium, which is close enough to weapons grade to be too close to comfort. It has nothing to do with energy. It has nothing to do with nuclear fission. It has nothing to do with any of this. This is weapons, and they continue to block inspectors repeatedly in places they don't want them to go. Probably these same places that they were secretly doing it when Obama signed the bad deal and screwed us and screwed the world and let the Iranians continue to do this. President Obama put America in greater danger with Iran. This is a global risk. If Iran gets the bomb, other rogue nations will follow. Who knows who they're going to give it to? Non-proliferation collapses. And a dangerous regime is more dangerous. Here's why this isn't the same as Iraq. I've been hearing, again, some of my friends who I love and support and would do anything for. They're wrong about this being equal to what happened in Iraq. Iraq had this claim, this umbrella, this people thought that Iran had weapons of mass destruction. The government said that. And we're seeing now today that those claims were either false or bad intelligence. No nuclear program was found. Now, some people say that because there was such a long lead up to the war before we showed up, that they could have moved those weapons. That's possible. We did find some nerve agents and some things, because we know that Saddam Hussein used to gas his own people with mustard gas and other things. We know that those occurred, and those could have been shot into any city if he had gotten a missile long enough. But it wasn't the nuclear weapons that I think people were thinking and talking about, thinking that they had. So then President Bush invaded Iraq for regime change, and Iran is now being targeted for its active nuclear threat. This is different. It's entirely different. We have confirmed by the UN, we have confirmed by the IAEA and Israeli intelligence, and the Iranians have admitted it, that they are working on nuclear weapons. They're working on having nuclear capabilities. Maybe they've not said weapons, but we know through intelligence, it's been proven. This is completely and totally different. Iraq was isolated. Iran is not. With the proxies, missiles, global reach, this is 100% entirely different. And the U.S. today isn't invading, but we need to posture defensively while Israel takes the lead. But based on intelligence or what Iran might do, President Trump may need to change his mind. We need to be ready, because who knows what the Iranians are going to pull. Iran is a real threat. They have a missile arsenal. They have a terror network that some of it has been damaged and destroyed. Obviously, they lost some things with Israel and with Syria. But those terrorist organizations and those terrorists still remain in certain sectors. Who knows what could happen with that? Of course, they continue to attack U.S. banks and infrastructure and Israeli tech sectors through cyber warfare. They are a regional destabilizer, especially if they target Saudi oil further, as well as Israeli citizens and U.S. troops via their proxies. And this is all, again, they're all part of a nuclear deception. Iran hides facilities, kicks out inspectors, and advances uranium enrichment behind closed doors. This isn't Iraq, my friends. This is entirely different. So what should the United States' response be? A show of strength, not invade, a show of strength, peace through strength. Deploy forces in strategic areas outside of Iran to be ready. Avoid direct war if possible, but be ready if needed, and put pressure on Iran to come back to the table for a real deal. Regime change needs to happen naturally in the right circumstances. The Iranian people are oppressed. We have seen it through the news. We have seen it through demonstrations. And of course, the government comes down on them. But every so often, we see it, especially younger folks who are looking for change in Iran. They can take over their own government. And honestly, it's when Khomeini, when the Ayatollah is gone, he's pretty old, there may be a big change happening right then and there. We need to enforce and reinforce Israel's defenses as well as our own. Israel has the Iron Dome, their aero systems, missile interceptors. We need to just keep those flowing. We need to keep those up. We need to keep those going. We need to work with our allies, the Gulf states, to share the threat, to build pressure through joint diplomacy while preparing militarily, and show Iran that we are not messing around anymore. Sanctions, sanctions, sanctions. Everything we can do to sanction them. Even further, to ensure that they're not getting tools, and they're not getting weapons, and they're not getting plans, and they're not getting whatever the support they need from the axis of evil, like Russia and North Korea and other places that may be helping each other. We know that this occurs. We've got to stop it. My final word on this, and I've gone long on this one, and I've got another big topic to get to. Why Iran must not get the bomb? Iran's nukes equals Israel's extinction and America's risk. Terror with nukes equals global nightmare. Unlike Iraq, this is a proven, documented, and active threat. Denying Iran the bomb isn't warmongering. It's protecting peace. And we may have to do peace through superior firepower or peace through strength. It is not the number one position that we should hold as Americans. But if everything else fails and we are in danger, we must act. The U.S. must lead with strength, clarity, and resolve. Peace when possible, deterrence at all times, and action if necessary. And with that, I want to move on to the final topic. And this was going to be the bigger topic that I have, but I don't have much time left. The Supreme Court, in a recent ruling, has allowed Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors to stand. This is a landmark decision in the fight to protect our children in America. What's the background of this case? The law at issue is Tennessee's Protecting Children from Gender Mutilation Act. It's a pretty tough name. And it bans gender-affirming surgeries and puberty blockers for minors in the state of Tennessee. Of course, it was challenged by LGBTQ activists and some families who claimed it violated constitutional rights. This case went through the federal court system, where lower courts initially put it on hold, but the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals allowed it to go into effect. The plaintiffs appealed to the United States Supreme Court, asking for emergency relief to block enforcement of the law. And of course, at the end, that has failed. This ruling that just came down, SCOTUS has declined to block Tennessee's law from taking effect. This ban stands. Vote was 6-3 along legal ideological lines, with the conservative majority allowing the law to be in full and currently indefinite effect. This is the final decision in this case, but there are opportunities that this could be challenged. In this challenge, the Supreme Court resolved the legal challenge brought against the Tennessee law based on the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. They have declared that is not an argument. But that does not prevent further challenges. The decision does not necessarily keep future challenges to the law based on different legal arguments or a different record to occur. But equal protection is not it. The court said there is no clearly established constitutional right for minors to receive gender-altering drugs or surgeries. And this ruling opens the door for other states to pass similar legislation and feel confident it will uphold in court. And by God, I hope Indiana does it. But what does this mean practically today? States like Tennessee, of course, this is their law, but Florida, Texas, Missouri, and others can enforce laws prohibiting puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and transgender surgeries for anyone under the age of 18. Clinics and doctors that continue to provide these services to minors could face fines, lose their licenses, potentially even go to jail. I've not fully read every detail of the law or any of the pending laws in other states. Very possible. And parents and activists who want to challenge these laws will now have to face an uphill battle in federal court in the future because there is established precedent for this. But again, other arguments can be made. But the gender-affirming care model is no longer protected by the federal courts, at least not automatically. And you know what? Good. Thank God for the United States Supreme Court. And I'm gonna give you, again, I tried to be objective on the show, at least in the beginning portion of what I'm talking about, to give you the facts, as many straight facts as I can give you. But then after that, I give you my opinion. I'm a talking head. I'm a podcaster. I'm here to say what I want to say what I have to say. You can listen, you can not listen, but I appreciate you being here, of course. Why is this even a thought that we should allow parents and guardians and activists to push children or to allow children to have these surgeries and take these medications that alter their body, but only in a way that it doesn't fully change? You cannot take a magic pill or cut off anything and be and change yourself from a man to a woman or vice versa. Period. You may have some characteristics based on what you've changed, but it hasn't changed who you are. And we don't let minors do these things on their own anyway. There's a lot of things that minors are not prepared for emotionally or intelligence-wise, or their character, or their ability to think clearly, because they're kids. Their brain is developing. They've not experienced enough. And we are responsible as parents and as guardians and as those who come around them to train a child in the way they should go. Not pull crap like this. We don't let kids buy alcohol or cigarettes. We don't let them get tattoos without parental consent. They can't drive before the age of 16. And even then, there's restrictions on that, especially here in Indiana. They can't have their friends in the car. They can't sign legal documents and contracts. They can't buy a house, even if they had the money, if they somehow had that money. They can't even have the bank account, I don't think, in their name without a guardian or a parent attached to it. They can't get married. They can't enlist in the military before the age of 18. Why? Because their brains are still developing, especially in the front here, in the cortex, which governs judgment, impulse control, and risk assessment. And you're going to let them take medications or mutilate themselves because of the way they emotionally feel? That's not science. That's not right. That's bullcrap. And anyone who does that should be ashamed of themselves. Studies show that the human brain is not fully mature till around age 25. And for dudes, probably even longer, right? Teenagers are emotional, they're impulsive, they're easily influenced. They often regret serious decisions made under peer pressure or social pressure or activist pressure and things like this. This is why we have age restrictions on almost everything else important. Because we know they're not ready. And we as adults and parents, that is our job, to prepare them as best as possible. And then when they turn 18, or wherever we're going to draw the line for adulthood, then they're adults. Maybe they're not fully developed. We've done the best we can. The law shows and says that this is where adulthood begins. This is where they can make their own decisions. And at that point, there's nothing else we can do other than be a resource and a guide as parents. But until that time, it's not about telling them what to do. It's not about influencing them with what I think. It is about protecting them and raising them, because that is my responsibility. Yet some activists want to hand them hormone blockers. Give them surgeries. Let them have surgeries. Irreversible, life-altering surgeries and drugs. That's not healthcare. That's not affirmation. That is abuse. Parents, guardians, or other outsiders who push kids to do this or allow it perpetrate child abuse. Period. Full stop. I believe anything that happens to a kid should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Attacking the most vulnerable or influencing them to do something because of your positions. I have zero tolerance for anyone that does anything against a child, and this is one of those things. It's horrible. And here's the truth about gender-affirming care. It changes so many things that can be harmful to a child. All kinds of drugs. It affects puberty. It affects the development of their body. It affects their brain. It affects everything. This is radical. This is unacceptable. Period. This isn't compassion. This isn't understanding. This isn't acceptance. This isn't any of those things. It is confusion, and it is abuse. Christians are called to love those who are struggling, but love does not mean enabling a lie. The tension between grace and truth, that's it right there. We can do it loving. We can do it with grace. But this is one of those lines that we do not allow to be crossed with our children. God created us male and female. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And to tell a child that they were born in the wrong body, of course, there are all kinds of other minor medical, they're not minor. There are rare medical conditions that, of course, that give us pause on a couple of things. But that is absolutely an exception and not the rule. Real compassion means helping someone through mental distress, not affirming a delusion. And in this case, not allowing parents with an agenda or activists with an agenda to permanently harm or confuse their child. Period. This is not a culture war. This is the difference between right and wrong. And this is one of those hills that I am willing to stand up on no matter what comes. And schools don't help, especially with the way some teachers are today, where they encourage them to hide gender transitions from parents. We know that's happened. Not everywhere. There's tons of great teachers. I know fabulous teachers. But there are some places where this happens. Drag shows are promoted in festivals in public where kids can see it or what have you. No, this is not inclusion. This is indoctrination. And the Tennessee law is part of a larger pushback. It is a parental and moral uprising. In closing, this is child abuse, period. No child should be mutilated in the name of ideology. Gender confusion is a mental health issue, period. And every parent, every pastor, and every policy maker needs to stand up and say, enough. Period. This isn't progress. This is regression. It's child sacrifice on the altar of wokeness. It's our job to stand firm. The Supreme Court drew a line, and now culturally, we need to push back until it is gone. I know this was an intense episode. I feel very strongly, specifically about kids, but I thank you for listening today. I thank you for your support. This is going to be a controversial topic. Who knows what people are going to say about me in coming days? But I know that I'm standing up for truth. And in the next episode, we talk about Iran and Israel. That's going to be a big topic too, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as controversial as what we talked about in the second segment today. But if you please would like and share and follow and subscribe and give us 5 stars wherever you might be listening, whether it's on social media clips or whether it's the longer episodes on Spotify and what have you, I would greatly appreciate it. Have a great